Throughout history, cults have sprung up with all sorts of bizarre, fascinating, and sometimes terrifying ideologies. Let's explore some of the most notorious in recent history. Heaven's Gate blast off to oblivion. California-based Heaven's Gate was founded in the 1970s by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. These two charismatic leaders spun a wild tale. Aliens were on their way, and the only escape from Earth's impending doom was to hitch a ride on their extraterrestrial spacecraft. Their followers, eager to shed their earthly bodies and achieve immortality, believed this wholeheartedly. So how did they prepare for this cosmic Uber? Well, Heaven's Gate wasn't your average hippie commune. Members lived a very restrictive life, adhering to a strict vegetarian diet and even castrating themselves to become angelic. Then, in 1997, with the arrival of the Hale-Bopp comet, they saw their chance. 39 members dressed in matching clothing willingly participated in a mass suicide, believing it was their ticket to the alien spacecraft. Aum Shinrikyo, when meditation turns murderous. Aum Shinrikyo was a Japanese doomsday cult founded by Shoko Asahara. He was a charismatic but blind leader who preached a blend of Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic prophecies. He promised his followers spiritual salvation and protection from a coming nuclear war, but with a sinister twist. Aum Shinrikyo amassed a deadly arsenal of chemical weapons, which were used in the horrific Tokyo subway sarin gas attack in 1995. This act of terrorism was aimed at hastening the apocalypse and showcasing Aum Shinrikyo's power. It took the lives of 13 people and injured thousands. Asahara, fueled by a warped sense of karma, believed the attack would ultimately lead to his group's victory. Thankfully, he was wrong. Asahara and his key followers were arrested and eventually executed in 2018. The People's Temple, a descent into darkness. The People's Temple was founded in America by Jim Jones in the 1950s. Jones, a charismatic preacher, initially attracted followers with his message of racial equality and social justice. However, things took a dark turn as Jones's paranoia grew. He convinced his congregation that the world was ending and that only isolation could save them. In 1974, he moved his flock to a remote settlement in Guyana called Jonestown. This wasn't a utopia, it was a prison camp. Defectors were silenced, and members were subjected to psychological manipulation. The horrifying climax came in 1978 when the Californian U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan visited Jonestown to investigate reports of abuse. Feeling cornered, Jones orchestrated a mass murder-suicide. Over 900 people, including children, were forced to drink cyanide-laced punch. This event serves as a chilling reminder of the devastating consequences of blind faith and a leader's manipulative power. The Order of the Solar Temple, suiting up for the next planet. In the mountains of Switzerland, Luc Jouret and Joseph de Mambro founded the Order of the Solar Temple in the 1980s. This cult blended elements of Christianity, UFO conspiracy theories, and the New Age movement. Their core belief? They were destined to travel to a higher plane of existence in the Sirius star system. But how did they achieve this interstellar migration? Through mass suicide. The Order of the Solar Temple carried out a series of rituals throughout the 1990s, with members convinced they were shedding their earthly bodies. However, these rituals were often more sinister, involving the execution of unsuspected defectors. The final chapter came in 1994 and 1995, with multiple fires and the discovery of over 70 bodies. This dark saga highlights the dangerous mix of extraterrestrial fantasies and apocalyptic anxieties that can fuel cult violence. The Manson Family, Helter Skelter, and hippie horror. Let's move back across the Atlantic to the United States and delve into the world of Charles Manson and his infamous family. Manson, a charismatic but deeply disturbed musician, surrounded himself with young women in the late 1960s. He twisted the hippie ideals of peace and love into a warped ideology centered around a mass racial conflict. Manson believed in an impending race war he called Helter Skelter, inspired by a Beatles song. This race war, in his twisted vision, would pit blacks against whites. He convinced his followers that by committing violent acts, they could initiate this race war and position themselves, being white, as the future leaders in a black-dominated world. In 1969, Manson, who never directly participated in the killings, orchestrated a series of brutal murders aimed at igniting this racial conflict. The most infamous victim was actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, along with 4 others at her home. These senseless acts sent shockwaves through the nation, shattering the idealism of the hippie movement and exposing the dark side of charismatic manipulation. Manson and his followers were eventually apprehended and convicted. Manson himself died in prison in 2017, never showing remorse for his crimes. The Manson family case remains a stark reminder of the dangers of cult indoctrination and the devastating consequences of a charismatic leader's warped ideology. Branch Davidians, Waco's fiery end. Now we head to Waco, Texas, where the Branch Davidians, a splinter group of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, took root under the leadership of David Koresh. He was another self-proclaimed prophet, reinterpreting religious texts, claiming he was the branch prophesied in the Book of Revelation. He stockpiled weapons, convinced of an imminent government siege, and isolated his followers from the outside world. In 1993, tensions between the Branch Davidians and the federal agents escalated, culminating in a 51-day standoff. The FBI attempted a raid on the compound, but a fire erupted, engulfing the building. 76 people, including Koresh and many children, died in the tragic inferno. This event sparked debates about religious freedom, government intervention, and the manipulative control cults can exert over their followers. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, a doomsday cult gone wrong. In Uganda, Credonia Merende and Dominic Katari Babo established the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God in 1989. This group emphasized strict adherence to the Ten Commandments, forbidding members from even talking or having sex for fear of breaking a rule. They also believed in an impending apocalypse on December 31, 1999. The leaders demanded money and possessions from their followers, promising salvation. When the prophesied apocalypse never came, members rebelled. Desperate and cornered, the leaders orchestrated a mass murder disguised as a mass suicide on March 17, 2000. Over 900 people perished in fire and a series of poisonings and killings. The Children of God, free love with a dark side. In the United States, David Berg founded the Children of God in the 1960s. Initially, it appeared to be a Christian evangelical movement. However, Berg soon strayed from traditional teachings, promoting a lifestyle of free love, communal living, and flirty fishing, using sex to recruit new members. The group attracted many young people seeking a sense of belonging and sexual liberation. As the Children of God gained notoriety, allegations of child abuse and exploitation surfaced. The group eventually underwent reforms, distancing themselves from these practices and becoming known as the Family International. While they still maintain some unconventional beliefs, they've shed their more controversial past. This case highlights the evolution of cults and the challenges in separating genuine faith from manipulative practices. The Anthill Kids, a descent into madness. In Canada, Roque Therault, a self-proclaimed prophet, established the Anthill Kids in the 1970s. Therault convinced his followers to abandon their lives and join his secluded community. There, they were subjected to brutal and bizarre rituals, including forced amputations and genital mutilation, which Therault believed were necessary for spiritual purification. The group became a nightmarish reality, with members living in constant fear and forced to obey Therault's every whim. Thankfully, in the 1980s, authorities caught wind of the cult's horrific practices. Therault was arrested and imprisoned, where he was eventually killed by a fellow inmate in 2011. The Anthill Kids stand as a chilling reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked cult leadership and the importance of speaking out against abuse. NXIVM, a self-help cult with a sinister secret. NXIVM, founded by Keith Raniere in 1998, started as a self-help organization promising personal empowerment and growth. It attracted a significant following, including celebrities and wealthy individuals. However, beneath the veneer of personal development lurked a dark secret society called DOS, short for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, Latin for Lord over Obedient Sisters. Here's where things get disturbing. DOS wasn't about empowerment, it was about exploitation. Women were coerced into joining, forced to perform degrading tasks, and branded with Rainier's initials. Rainier, a manipulative and narcissistic leader, controlled his followers through fear, shame, and a system of blackmail. The truth about NXIVM's inner workings came to light in 2017 when several women bravely came forward with their experiences. Rainier was arrested, and a series of trials exposed the cult's horrifying practices. In 2020, Rainier was convicted of multiple charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking. Down Under Darkness, the Family Cult of Australia. The Family, an Australian group, was founded in the 1960s by Anne Hamilton Byrne. Hamilton Byrne, a charismatic but deeply troubled woman, initially presented the Family as a Christian outreach program. However, things took a sinister turn as she convinced her followers that she was the perfect mother and the reincarnation of Jesus. The Family's ideology revolved around absolute obedience to Hamilton Byrne. Members were subjected to harsh punishments, including beatings and isolation for even the slightest infraction. Children were malnourished, denied education, and forced to work as unpaid labor for the cult. The Family also harbored some truly bizarre beliefs, including the idea that aliens were going to invade the Earth to cleanse the world of evil. No one should intervene if children were suffering because they should not interfere with God's plan, and that miracles, believe it or not, were delivered during yoga practices. Thankfully, in the 1980s, authorities raided the Family's compound, rescuing the malnourished and abused children. Despite police raids and a massive investigation, the only penalties ever imposed on Hamilton Byrne was a $5,000 fine for falsifying a statutory declaration. She eventually died in 2019 at the age of 98 in a Melbourne nursing home. Osho Rajneesh movement, from free love to financial exploitation. In India, a cult started and led by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, also known as Osho, a man whose orange robes and Rolls-Royce collection were about as contradictory as they sound. Rajneesh became known as the sex guru in India and as the Rolls-Royce guru in the United States. They basically sought enlightenment and freedom from societal norms. Popular during the 70s, this group, known for its free love philosophy and lavish lifestyle, faced accusations of sexual abuse and financial exploitation, leaving a trail of controversy in its wake. Let's just say their definition of spiritual enlightenment was a little materialistic. Their ashram in India boomed. But things got crazy when they built a utopian city in Oregon called Rajneeshpuram. Conflicts, bioterrorism, and power struggles led to a dramatic downfall. Angel's Landing. Only sex will keep me alive. There's another creepy case with some echoes in Wichita, Kansas. In the early 2000s, a dude named Daniel Perez, who also went by Luke Castro, ran a cult on a property called Angel's Landing. Classic cult leader move, Perez convinced people he was an angel with superpowers and told his followers that he needed to have sex with young girls to stay alive. Things fell apart in 2003 with a suspicious death. Investigations revealed a dark truth. Perez was using life insurance from his followers, and there were whispers of sexual abuse, especially towards young girls. This angel turned out to be a monster. Thankfully, he faced justice and got multiple life sentences. Angel's Landing is a grim reminder of how cults exploit fear and isolate people. Synanon, from drug rehab to tyranny. In California, Charles Dederich founded Synanon in the 1950s as a drug rehabilitation program. Initially, Synanon offered a seemingly innovative approach to helping people overcome addiction. However, over time, the program morphed into a controlling and abusing cult. Dederich, the charismatic leader, developed a system of brutal confrontation therapy sessions where members were subjected to relentless public humiliation and verbal attacks. This created a climate of fear and obedience, silencing dissent and consolidating Dederich's power. Synanon's violent tactics to quiet anyone reporting on their practices, such as placing a de-rattled rattlesnake in the mailbox of Paul Morantz, an attorney who had successfully brought a lawsuit against the Synanon, eventually led to multiple arrests, including that of Dederich himself, all who pleaded no contest to charges of assault and conspiracy to commit murder. The Internal Revenue Service also revoked the organization's tax-exempt status. They were ordered to pay $17 million in back taxes. This bankrupted Synanon, which formally dissolved in 1991. This case serves as a stark reminder of how seemingly helpful initiatives can transform into dangerous cults under the wrong leadership. Heavenly Jerusalem, from Siberian bunkers to nuclear obsession. In Russia, Pyotr Kuznetsov established Heavenly Jerusalem, a doomsday cult in the 1990s. Kuznetsov, a former shepherd, convinced his followers that the world was ending in a nuclear apocalypse. He built a series of underground bunkers to shield them from the coming disaster. Heavenly Jerusalem's members lived in constant fear and isolation. Kuznetsov controlled every aspect of their lives, even dictating who they could marry and have children with. Thankfully, in 2007, authorities raided the cult's compound, rescuing the pale, malnourished members who had been living underground for years. Cults often prey on people's vulnerabilities, a desire for belonging, a search for meaning, or a longing for connection. Charismatic leaders can be incredibly manipulative, using fear, guilt, and isolation to control followers. Do your research and don't be afraid to ask questions before joining any groups. If something feels off, it probably is. And if you're asked to drink some special Kool-Aid for spiritual ascension, you're better off politely declining and running as fast as you can to the nearest exit.